Imagine like a being who can hear your heart skip a beat from, I don't know, 3 miles away.
Yeah, or see right through the walls of your house.
Exactly. And he can fly faster than an F-16 fighter jet. But now, imagine that same being has the emotional maturity of an actual toddler.
Right, with an insatiable need for attention.
Totally. And absolutely zero empathy for human life. So you aren't imagining a traditional superhero here. You are imagining a walking, talking, extinction-level event.
It's honestly a terrifying premise because it completely subverts the core fantasy of the rescue narrative.
Right.
I mean, we've been conditioned for nearly a century to believe that absolute power naturally pairs with absolute goodness, the cape, the smile, catching the falling bus.
The classic Superman stuff.
Exactly. We desperately want to believe that gods among us would inherently care about us.
Well, welcome to another deep dive. Today we are taking a massive stack of sources from wikis and character analyses to some incredibly detailed fan theory Reddit threads.
Some very passionate threads, I might add.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
very intense. And our mission is to dissect one of modern media's most terrifying figures, which is Homelander from the franchise The Boys.
Yeah.
We're looking at what happens when the world's most powerful being is also its most emotionally broken and, well, morally bankrupt.
We're examining Homelander not just as a piece of fictional pop culture, but really as a deeply layered study of manufactured power. It's about psychological frailty and corporate manipulation. It's a look at what happens when the very systems designed to protect a society are the ones secretly building its monsters behind closed doors.
Okay, let's unpack this from the very beginning, because the chasm between Homelander's public persona and his dark hidden reality is massive.
It's night and day.
It really is. Like, if you look at the public-facing lore within the universe of The Boys, the mega-corporation Bought American sells him as this alien savior.
Right, the official corporate narrative is that he crash-landed in the U.S. as a baby.
Yeah, which is this incredibly deliberate, weaponized parody of Superman's wholesome origins, mixed with, the flag-waving apple pie patriotism of Captain America.
And, the word weaponized is really key there, because Vought didn't just manufacture a superhero, they genetically engineered a demographic marketing tool.
Wow, yeah.
But the horrifying truth documented in our sources is that he wasn't born from the stars at all. He was grown in a sterile, secret corporate laboratory.
So he's literally a product.
Exactly, a product. And his genetic origins are incredibly dark. If you look at the original comic books, his DNA comes from a character named Stormfront.
Oh, right.
Yeah, who was a former member of the Hitler Youth injected with an enhancement serum called Compound V.
Which is just a chilling foundation. Your ultimate American hero is literally built from fascist DNA.
Yeah, it doesn't get much darker than that.
And then in the TV show, they pivot the genetics slightly, but the theme absolutely remains. He's grown from a DNA sample of Soldier Boy.
Right, America's original hero.
Yeah, but a deeply flawed and wildly out-of-control hero from a previous generation. So either way, his genetic legacy is entirely rooted in supremacy and violence.
What's fascinating here is why this matters so deeply to his psychology. I mean, the genetics are just the baseline. The environment is what truly breaks him.
Right, nature versus nurture.
Exactly. Homelander was deprived of basic humanity, connection, and consequence from day one. He didn't have a Clark Kent upbringing with warm, morally grounded parents on a farm in Kansas.
Far from it.
His childhood was defined by cold, detached scientific testing. In the comics, the scientists were actually so terrified of what they had created that Vought kept him chained down.
Wait, didn't they use a bomb?
Yes. They kept a literal hydrogen bomb strapped to him just in case he tried to escape or, threw a tantrum.
I mean, just pause and think about the logistical horror of that. A hydrogen bomb strapped to a child.
It's unfathomable.
And the TV show's version of his childhood doesn't make it much warmer either. He was raised surrounded by scientists in lab coats like Jonah Vogelbaum.
Yeah, people with clipboards.
Right. He didn't have a mother to comfort him, just researchers taking notes. And because he didn't know his own strength, he accidentally killed his tutors.
Yeah, the sources mention that.
There's a specific incident detailed in 1994 where he snapped a woman's spine just by hugging her too hard.
Oh, man.
It's like the ultimate tragic child star scenario.
Mm.
But instead of just dealing with the psychological pressures of fame and terrible stage parents, this child star has nuclear capabilities.
Right.
And a corporate PR team covering up mass murder.
Yeah, and that deprivation of humanity is the mechanism that prevents him from ever developing empathy.
How could he? Right.
Exactly. If you're raised in an environment where your only value is what you can destroy, and the people raising you look at you with clinical terror rather than love, you learn to view interactions as purely transactional.
Right.
That foundational trauma perfectly explains his sociopathic contempt for what he considers lesser beings. He doesn't see humans as people because he was never treated like a person himself.
He was treated like a weapon.
It's exactly a weapon.
And when you look at the sheer scale of his abilities, those physical tools aren't mechanisms for justice. They're just mechanisms for his tantrums.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Vought gave this volatile product an arsenal that makes him nearly impossible to stop. We're talking about the power set of an unhinged god here.
The physical power set is staggering, and our sources really highlight just how completely outmatched humanity is. I mean, he possesses super strength, flight, and super speed.
Oh, the speed is wild.
Yeah, there's a scene where he moves fast enough to save the character Billy Butcher from a point-blank explosion.
After the detonator has already been pressed.
Exactly. But his enhanced senses are arguably more terrifying than his physical strength. He has super hearing that allows him to track heartbeats and listen to whispered conversations from literally miles away.
Which, if we think about the psychological toll of that, how does having super hearing completely destroy a person's ability to have a normal human interaction?
It would drive you crazy.
Imagine trying to plot against, or even just have a casual conversation with, a guy who can literally hear your heart rate spike when you lie to him. It isolates him entirely.
There is no such thing as a genuine interaction for him. Everyone is always terrified, and he can hear it.
And then, of course, there's the invulnerability. In the sources, there's a quote from FUNKO executive Madeline Stillwell where she outlines the reality of his durability.
Oh, I remember this one.
She outright says, there isn't a weapon on Earth that they haven't thrown at him. They've all failed.
He is functionally bulletproof and bomb-proof, but his ultimate weapon, the one he uses with the most chilling casual frequency, is his heat vision.
The laser eyes.
Yes. He uses this not as a last resort, but to effortlessly execute people. He uses it on innocent civilians, and he uses it to discipline fellow Suppies.
Like supersonic.
Exactly. He murders Supersonic just to send a message. And in one incredibly brutal moment, he confronts another hero, Blind Spot.
Oh gosh, this part is hard to read.
It really is. Blind Spot is a character who relies entirely on super hearing to navigate and fight. And Homelander doesn't even use his lasers. He just claps his hands over Blind Spot's ears.
Just completely deafening and neutralizing him in a second.
It's a terrifying application of physics and sheer cruelty.
He does have one oddly specific limitation, though. His X-ray vision can see through absolutely anything except zinc.
Which is such a brilliant, twisted nod to Superman's inability to see through lead.
It totally is. But I want to push back on something regarding his powers, because I was reading through the sources, specifically this highly detailed Reddit thread we pulled from Rask Science Fiction.
Oh, the tactile telekinesis thread.
Yes. Fans were deeply theorizing about how his powers actually work within the physical laws of that universe. One user suggested he might not just have super strength, but something called tactile telekinesis.
Yeah, that's a very popular theory in superhero physics debates.
Right. And the idea is that he generates a telekinetic field around whatever he touches. The Reddit user argued this perfectly explains his infamous failure to save the hijacked airplane, Flight 37.
Okay, I see where they're going.
Because if you think about trying to physically lift a massive commercial airliner by its nose or its underbelly, physics dictates that a human-sized hand would just punch right through the aluminum hull like wet tissue paper.
Right. He wouldn't lift the plane. He would just tear a hole in it.
Exactly. So the theory is, because he couldn't extend a telekinetic field around the whole plane, he couldn't save them. Does that hold any water based on our sources?
I mean, I love the thought experiment. And from a purely physics-based standpoint, the Reddit user is absolutely right about what happens when you apply pinpoint pressure to a commercial jet.
Yeah.
But if we look strictly at the source material and Homelander's psychological characterization, we have to completely dismantle that theory.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Homelander didn't fail to save Flight 37 because of the laws of aerodynamics or a lack of tactile telekinesis. He let those people die because he is profoundly lazy.
Wow.
And he completely lacks any actual heroic technique.
So it wasn't a physics problem, it was a PR problem.
Exactly that. He arrived at the plane, realized the situation was messy, and quickly calculated that he couldn't easily save everyone on board.
Right.
If he flew a few people down to the ground, the rest would die and there would be witnesses to his failure. Saving only a few would tarnish his perfect, godlike public image.
That makes total sense for his character.
So he made the sociopathic choice to let them all die to cover his tracks and ensure there were no survivors to tell the real story. He relies entirely on raw, brute power.
So if it requires effort, he's out.
Exactly. If a situation requires hard work, strategy, or risks his approval ratings, he simply won't do it.
That is so incredibly bleak. It's not that he couldn't figure out a way. It's that he just didn't care enough to try. Which pivots us away from his physical arsenal and right into his most dangerous weapon of all. It's not the heat vision, and it's not the super speed.
Right.
It's his psychological manipulation and his terrifying realization that he answers to absolutely no one.
This is the turning point where his character arc goes from alarming to just downright apocalyptic.
Yeah.
Initially, Homelander is driven by a desperate need for public love and approval. He craves the adoration of the masses because it's the only thing filling the massive psychological void left by his sterile, loveless childhood in the lab.
Right. The applause of a crowd is his substitute for a mother's affection.
Exactly. And Vought knows this. They use his obsession with his approval ratings as a leash to control him.
But then there's this massive shift. The heroes Starlight and Queen Maeve attempt to leverage that exact desperation against him.
Yeah, the blackmail.
Right. They get their hands on the video of him abandoning Flight 37, and they try to blackmail him. They think that the threat of losing his precious public approval, the threat of being exposed as a monster, will keep him in check and force him to leave them alone.
It's a logical move on their part, but it backfires spectacularly.
Totally.
It results in a brilliant, terrifying moment of Homelander just calling their bluff. He is confronted with the destruction of his public image, and instead of backing down, his mindset shifts drastically.
He flips the script.
He does. He tells Starlight that he would prefer to be loved, yes, it's easier. But if they take that away from him, if he loses the public's love, he will happily accept their fear.
The quote from the sources where he maps this out is chilling.
Mm-hmm.
He stands there and calmly details exactly what he'll do if they leak the video.
Oh, it's so dark.
He says he'll take out the nerve centers first, the White House, the Pentagon, destroying the country's domestic defense capabilities in minutes.
Right.
And then, in his own words, he says he will wipe New York off the FING map for fun.
That dialogue marks the moment the illusion of control completely shatters. And we see this newly untethered psychology play out in his hostile corporate takeover of Vought.
Yeah, he just cleans house.
He begins to systematically eliminate anyone and everyone who tries to exert authority over him. He murders Madeline Stillwell, the executive who manipulated his deep-seated mommy issues for years.
Right.
He orchestrates the ousting of the untouchable CEO, Stan Edgar, partly because Edgar wasn't afraid of him, which drove Homelander insane.
That really got under his skin.
And then he installs terrified puppet rulers like Ashley Barrett so he can run the entire megacorporation completely unchecked.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It reminds me of a glitching artificial intelligence.
Oh, I like that.
Right? Imagine a tech company programs an incredibly powerful AI, and they hard-code it to care entirely about likes, upvotes, and positive user sentiment. That metric is the control mechanism.
Right, the programming.
But once the AI becomes sentient enough to realize it doesn't actually need the upvotes, and it can just delete the programmers and physically destroy the servers without consequence, the whole system completely collapses. Homelander realizes the leash Vought was holding him with was entirely in his own head.
That AI comparison is spot on. He realizes his parameters are self-imposed. And if we connect this to the real world, it highlights a deeply unsettling truth about how much power we collectively assign to figures simply because they are charismatic on camera.
Yeah, that's so true.
Homelander is terrifying because he proves that when a single entity has absolute insurmountable power, the supposed systems of checks and balances like corporate boards, the threat of blackmail, or even the weight of public opinion are completely imaginary.
They're just suggestions, basically.
Exactly. They are polite fictions that only work if the person holding the power agrees to play by the rules. Homelander simply stops playing.
Which brings us to the meta-narrative. Let's zoom out and look at the story from a bird's-eye view.
Good idea.
Because examining how this all resolves in the source material reveals exactly what the creators are trying to say about our society. And the comic books and the TV show handle the concept of accountability in vastly different ways.
They absolutely do. In the original comic books, Vought actually did have a physical failsafe.
Right, they weren't totally clueless.
No, the corporation wasn't entirely stupid. They knew Homelander was a ticking time bomb. It's revealed in a massive late-stage twist that the silent, mysterious ninja character, Black Noir, is actually a genetic clone of Homelander.
Which is such a crazy reveal.
It is. Noir was created solely to be kept in the shadows and kill Homelander if he ever went completely rogue.
And Noir's method of execution isn't just a physical fight. It's psychological torture. Noir runs around in secret, committing these unspeakable atrocities, brutal murders, cannibalism, absolute horrors, while dressed in a Homelander suit.
Yeah, to mess with his head.
Exactly. He takes photos to gaslight Homelander into thinking he is blacking out and losing his mind. Noir intentionally drives him insane, just so he can finally be given the green light to fulfill his directive, which he eventually does by killing Homelander in this incredibly brutal, gory fight.
It's a wild, shocking comic book twist. But the TV show takes a completely different and arguably much darker path. Showrunner Eric Kripke explicitly scrapped the clone idea.
Right.
There is no secret Black Noir clone. There is no fail-safe in the television universe.
Which changes everything.
It does. Instead, Kripke designed the TV version of Homelander as a direct metaphor for former U.S. President Donald Trump, and more broadly, as the living, breathing personification of how the rest of the world views the United States.
Immensely powerful, dangerously insecure, and recklessly unilateral.
Exactly.
It's worth noting here because Eric Kripke explicitly stated this in interviews, and it's thoroughly documented in the show's production notes that this metaphor was highly intentional. And look, just for you listening, regardless of where you or I sit politically, because our goal today is strictly to look at the creator's blueprints, not to take sides or endorse any specific worldview. The sociological mechanism Kripke is highlighting here is universally fascinating.
Absolutely.
He's exploring what happens when toxic behavior isn't punished, but validated.
I'm glad you brought that up because Kripke's primary intent with the TV show's departure from the comics was to highlight the echo chamber effect. He wanted to show how a leader's toxicity doesn't just exist in a vacuum.
It spreads.
It bleeds directly into the public consciousness and gives permission for others to act on their worst impulses.
And we see that culminating in arguably one of the most shocking moments of the entire series. Homelander is surrounded by a massive crowd of his own supporters.
Oh, this scene.
A protester who supports Starlight throws something at him. And in broad daylight, surrounded by cameras, Homelander uses his heat vision to laser the protester's head off.
It's so visceral.
There's this agonizing moment of silence where you think his empire is finally over. And instead of running in terror from this blatant murder, the crowd cheers.
They applaud him.
They do. So I was thinking about the comic ending, where Black Noir is the failsafe. It's gory, it's a great twist, but honestly, it feels a bit like a cop-out. Does the removal of that failsafe in the TV show actually make Homelander a much more terrifying villain because it forces society to deal with him?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, removing the failsafe makes him infinitely scarier.
Yeah.
Because in the TV show, his true invincibility doesn't come from his heat vision or his impenetrable skin. It comes from the willing complicity of the masses.
Wow.
The crowd cheering for his violence in broad daylight is far more dangerous than his physical strength because it validates his worst impulses. It tells the glitching AI that murder earns upvotes.
That's a terrifying thought.
The comic book villain was a monster created and destroyed by a corporation. The TV villain is a monster empowered and sustained by the applause of everyday people.
So what does this all mean for you, listening right now? Why does knowing the intricate lore of a fictional, laser-eyed psychopath make you well-informed?
It's a valid question.
Because Homelander isn't just a comic book bad guy. He is the ultimate modern parable about the dangers of media literacy, corporate greed, and the deeply human tendency to worship power over morality.
Absolutely.
He forces us to look at the screens in our own homes, look at the figures we elevate, and ask why we applaud the things we do.
This raises an important question, and it's one I want to leave you with today. In the comic books, a corrupt corporation secretly built a clone to destroy the monster they made. There was a backup plan to save humanity from itself.
Right.
But in the real world and in the TV show, no such failsafe exists. So when a society's systems of accountability completely fail, and the public actually begins to stand in the street and cheer for the villain, Who is really to blame for the monster? The isolated lab that built him in the dark, or the audience that applauds him in the light?
That is a heavy one to chew on. The burning Norman Rockwell painting isn't just a tragic accident. Maybe it's a bonfire we all willingly gathered around to watch. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the media you consume, keep looking past the cape, and we will catch you next time.